You stand in the imperial capital of Jiankang, the air heavy with incense and the faint metallic tang of blood that never quite washes away from the palace stones. Summer heat presses down, yet a strange chill prickles your skin as you walk through corridors lined with painted dragons and golden latticework. The silence is deceptive. Beneath it, you can almost hear the pulse of fear that beats within every servant, every courtier, every trembling eunuch who passes by. The boy who rules this realm is no ordinary sovereign. He is not yet a man, barely 17, but he sits upon the dragon throne with a presence that terrifies even generals hardened by war. His name is Liu Ziye, known formally as Emperor Qianfei. But in whispers, in muttered prayers at night, he is called something else, the perverse monarch, the cursed son, the emperor of nightmares. You approach the audience hall. The bronze doors creak open, and light from 100 oil lamps flickers across a figure draped in shimmering silk. At first, you think him handsome. Smooth skin, slender frame. The delicate features of a boy, not yet hardened by age. But then, you see his eyes. They are wide, fever-bright, darting from shadow to shadow as though invisible assassins lurk in every corner. His smile is wrong, too sharp, too eager, the grin of a predator who delights in watching flies struggle before he plucks their wings. The courtiers bow low, their foreheads pressed to the cold stone floor. No one dares meet his gaze. Even a flicker of eye contact could be read as mockery, and mockery here is a death sentence. You lower your head with them, but curiosity betrays you. You steal one glance upward, and in that instant, he sees you. The emperor claps his hands, a sound too loud for such delicate palms, a signal sharp as a blade. Soldiers file in, dragging women forward, princesses, concubines, noble ladies of the court. Their silks trail behind them like funeral banners, their faces pale, their eyes shining with unshed tears. Among them, you recognize blood relatives, his cousins, his aunt, even his sister. They bow too, trembling, though not from reverence, from fear. He laughs. It is not the laughter of youth. It is jagged, manic, like glass breaking. He speaks lightly, almost playfully, but each word strikes like a whip. You all belong to me. The hall falls into a silence so profound, you can hear the heartbeat in your ears. Even the torches seem to flicker lower, ashamed to bear witness. The women kneel, the soldiers avert their eyes, and you understand at once. This is no longer a court of law and order. This is a stage for the emperor's fantasies. Here, the rules are his desires. Here, the dynasty bends to the twisted hunger of a boy king. He steps down from the throne, trailing silk and arrogance. His gaze moves over the women, slow and appraising, like a butcher at market examining livestock. He pauses at one woman, his aunt, and a sly grin curves his lips. He pauses at another, his sister, and his fingers twitch with restless excitement. He does not distinguish between blood and stranger, sacred and profane. To him, every body in this chamber is a possession, a toy, a reflection of his absolute power. The courtiers do not speak. Their lips press into bloodless lines. Their hands tremble inside wide sleeves. They know what will follow. Already the rumors have spread, of princesses forced into his bed, of noble ladies weeping in shame, of men stripped naked and humiliated before the court. Rumors whispered too softly to be heard, yet somehow always reaching the emperor's ears. And those who whispered were never seen again. Your stomach twists. The atmosphere is suffocating, like drowning in incense smoke. Yet, no one dares breathe too loudly. The emperor paces slowly, savoring the tension, feeding on it like a starving beast. At last, he stops, raises his hand, and with the same cheerful tone one might use to order wine, he commands, "Bring them closer." The women are dragged forward. Silk tears. Bracelets clatter to the floor. A muffled sob echoes through the chamber. before being silenced by the butt of a soldier's spear. You close your eyes, wishing you could unsee what is unfolding, but the horror clings to you like shadows you cannot outrun. In this moment, one truth brands itself into your soul. You are not a spectator. You are inside this story, inside this palace, inside the nightmare. And there is no escape. The young emperor tilts his head, studying the broken faces before him. His voice softens, almost tender, yet more terrifying than a scream. The dynasty is mine. Your bodies are mine. Your souls are mine. There is no difference. A shiver runs through the hall. You feel it too, deep in your bones. For you realize the chronicles will one day record this reign, not in terms of victories or reforms, but in whispers of perversion and cruelty. The boy before you is not simply a ruler. He is a storm that will consume his court, his family, and his empire in madness. And the storm has only just begun. The night is heavy with the scent of rain. Though no clouds darken the sky, you are summoned again to the inner palace, a place where rumors come alive and shame is written into the stones themselves. This time, the emperor does not wait for ceremony. He lounges on the dragon throne, a predator disguised in silks of imperial yellow, his eyes gleaming with anticipation. The air crackles with an energy you recognize. Something terrible is about to unfold. His voice cuts through the silence like a blade through flesh. Bring her in. At first you do not know whom he means. Then the soldiers part, and you see her. Princess Liu Yingmei, the emperor's aunt. She enters hesitantly, her steps small, her head bowed, the jeweled pins in her hair trembling as if they too fear the path ahead. She is no maiden, but a married woman, the wife of General He Mai, respected in court and feared in battle. Yet here, in this hall, her identity means nothing. She is merely prey. You watch the boy king rise from his throne. His face is illuminated by torchlight, and for a moment, he looks almost angelic, like some divine figure stepping down from a celestial portrait. But then he speaks, and the illusion shatters. Aunt, I have missed you. The words are wrong. Their softness hides a command. Liu Yingmei freezes, her breath catching, but she cannot answer. The silence stretches too long. The emperor frowns, a gesture, and two eunuchs seize her arms, forcing her forward until she kneels before him. He leans close, so close you can see the fever in his eyes, the trembling hunger in his lips. You will not return to your husband, he whispers, loud enough for the entire chamber to hear. You belong to me now. Gasps ripple through the attendants, quickly muffled by fear. You feel your own heart seize. This is not simply lust, it is conquest, humiliation, the desecration of bloodlines meant to be sacred. The emperor does not care. His laughter fills the hall, manic and triumphant, echoing from the carved dragon pillars. Days later, the deception begins. Orders are issued with cold precision. A palace maid, chosen for her resemblance to Liu Yingmei, is killed in secret. Her body is dressed in royal garments, her face veiled. Messengers rush to He Mai's residence, bearing the grim news. The princess has died suddenly. A coffin is delivered, wrapped in mourning silks, accompanied by ceremonial guards. You hear whispers of the funeral that follows. He Mai, stricken with grief, buries what he believes is his wife, never knowing her true fate. Guests attend, incense burns, tears fall into the soil of the capital, all for a lie crafted by a boy who thinks himself cleverer than heaven. And within the palace, the real Liu Yingmei is clothed not in mourning robes, but in silk, renamed, reshaped, forced into the role of concubine under the title Ziye Guipin. The transformation is swift. One day she is a princess, a wife, a woman of dignity. The next, she is paraded through the palace in an imperial carriage usually reserved for empresses. Soldiers line the streets, not in mourning, but in silence. enforcing the command that none may look upon her with pity. The boy king smiles as he watches her pass, delighted by the theatre of his own cruelty. To the people, she is dead. To him, she is his possession. But Hime does not accept humiliation quietly. Whispers reach the palace. He is restless, gathering. Men of loyalty, plotting revenge. He has lived as a warrior, and warriors do not bow to shame. You hear his name spoken in hushed tones, laced with admiration and dread. Perhaps he will succeed. Perhaps he will strike down the monster boy and restore some semblance of order to the realm. The emperor hears the whispers too, and instead of fear, he laughs. He relishes the challenge, the game of predator and prey turned inside out. On the appointed day, Hime rides out, planning to intercept the emperor during a pleasure outing. But spies have betrayed him. The trap is inverted. You are there when the soldiers drag Hime through the palace gates, bound and beaten, his once proud armor stripped away. His eyes still burn with defiance, even as blood trickles down his face. He shouts curses at the emperor, words so raw and powerful they make even the guards falter. You shame your family, you shame your dynasty, you shame heaven itself. The boy king only smiles. He approaches slowly, savoring the moment, and then, before the entire court, he plunges a blade into Hime's chest himself. Not a clean strike, not merciful. He twists the weapon, watching the agony writhe across his victim's face. When the general falls, the emperor stands over him like a child who has broken a toy, satisfied, grinning. The hall is silent. No one moves. No one dares. Liu Yingmei is not present, but you imagine her screams, her despair, the horror of knowing her husband is dead and she lives as a concubine to the boy who killed him. And you, forced to witness, feel something darker than grief. You feel the weight of inevitability, for if he can do this to his own blood, his own kin, then no bond in this world is sacred. No law holds sway. No god will intervene. The boy king turns, blood dripping from the blade, and his eyes meet yours. He laughs again, high and shrill, the sound of innocence long ago devoured by madness. Do you see? Even heroes fall before me. Even family bends to my will. The courtiers bow lower, their foreheads pressed hard enough against the stone to draw blood. You follow suit, your body trembling. In that moment, you realize the truth that will haunt you long after. This is not merely incest, not merely cruelty. This is a declaration of war against the very concept of order, of kinship, of humanity itself. The reign of Emperor Qianfei has only begun, and already, blood pools at his feet. Dawn bleeds slowly into the palace, like a wound that refuses to close. You are summoned to the Hall of Whispering Fragrance, a room whose beauty feels like mockery now, where lacquered screens hide conversations that should never be spoken aloud. Today, the air shivers with rumor before anyone arrives. The princess of Shanyin is coming, not as daughter of a late emperor, not as the wife of a consort. She comes as something else entirely, as gravity around which the young ruler's madness orbits. She enters first. Princess Liu Chuyu moves with the casual confidence of someone who learned early that fear is a currency and she can mint it at will. Her robes are river-smooth silk, her hair a black tide studded with pearls, her mouth touched with the faintest red that could be a smile or a wound. She does not bow to anyone present, least of all to you, or to the officials stationed discreetly along the corridor to pretend this is a normal morning in a normal dynasty. It is neither. The emperor arrives moments later, a flicker of gold and impatience, still young enough to be moved by mood alone. He looks at her the way a starving man looks at a feast and a pyromaniac looks at a lit taper. You see it in the angle of his jaw, the gleam just under the eyelids. This is not the manner of a sovereign greeting a sister. This is appetite dressed in brocade. Elder sister, he says, voice dripping with a fondness that sounds like a blade wrapped in gauze. You sent for me. She does not kneel. She laughs, a bright, brittle sound that rings to the rafters. I did, she says, because fairness demands it. Fairness. The word hangs in the air like incense turned sour. She circles him once, slowly, as if assessing a horse she's been offered. You, she says, are attended by hundreds, no, thousands, of beauties. Every corridor I walk is a river of powdered faces and lowered eyes, all of them yours. And what is mine? She turns to the gathered staff, to you, to the servants who try to become invisible against the columns. One husband, one, and he tires easily. The court stills. You know the story. Everyone does. The Princess of Shanyin has never feigned chastity. She is intelligent, quick-tongued, joy-hungry in ways that would be merely scandalous in another house. But here, in this palace with this brother on the throne, appetite becomes policy, desire becomes decree. The emperor smiles. What do you want, sister? What is owed? She replies. Balance. If the Son of Heaven may plunge his hands into 1,000 jars of honey, why should the emperor's sister suck at a single dry bone? Give me what is proper. He looks delighted. He adores audacity, especially when it confirms his conviction that rules were made merely to prove who can break them. Name it, he says. She does not hesitate. 30. It's not a number, it is a sentence. A gasp shivers through the hall and is gone. She goes on, voice like silk over steel. 30 youths, she says, chosen for their beauty, for their strength, for their ability to please. I will have a retinue as rich as your harem is crowded, and if I take comfort, I take it without shame. You feel the floor tilt under you, the world rearranging itself into a shape you barely recognize. The emperor's laughter bursts forth, bright and reckless. 30, he repeats, savoring the audacity. Scribe, record it. Chamberlain, prepare a list. Eunuchs, begin the choosing. The Princess of Shanyin shall not lack for companions. Companions. A word stretched until it snaps. By afternoon, the machinery of selection groans into action. Messengers streak through the capital like arrows. The inner registry, usually concerned with rosters of concubines and servants, becomes a ledger of male beauty. Skin like new jade, shoulders like cut stone, hands without callus, eyes that catch light. Families who once prayed their sons might enter the civil service now find themselves praying to be overlooked. Some push their handsome sons forward, calculating that a princess's favor is worth any price. Others lock doors, bribe clerks, vanish boys into monasteries or distant cousins' farms. It does not matter. The palace can find anything it decides to possess. You watch the first 15 arrive that night, terrified, polished, perfumed, each presented like an offering, before an altar that purrs back. Princess Liu Ziye sits under a lantern whose silk shade gilds her skin and examines them with a buyer's coolness. She is not cruel, not exactly, but she is not tender either. She gestures. Youths are kept, dismissed, reassigned. The discarded ones do not breathe until the outer door closes behind them. The chosen ones do not breathe at all. The list swells to 30 within 3 days. They are housed in a pavilion whose doors never close fully, whose laughter is never entirely honest. A new etiquette blossoms like mold in a wet room. How to stand near the princess without seeming to demand. How to bow low while showing your jawline to best advantage. How to swallow terror and appear mercifully dumb. The princess commands musicians, with a tap of her nail on the low table. She taps faster when the emperor visits, because performance pleases him. He comes often. He sits with her in the pavilion like a boy who has found a new toy and wants to see how many ways it can be made to sing. The court calls it sibling affection, a phrase that burns your tongue even when you speak it only to yourself. He does not hide the glances that linger too long. She does not hide the touch that returns lightly at first, then as claim. One evening, during a banquet staged as if the world is not collapsing outside these lacquered walls, The emperor raises a cup. To fairness, he says. To balance. The sister lifts hers as well. To joy, she replies. To taking what is ours. The rumour spreads beyond the palace doormen before the wine cools. The market women know by dawn. By twilight, boatmen on the river repeat the story in half a dozen dialects, each more brazen than the last. Morality does not simply bend. It is pried open with a crowbar. If the throne itself mocks the ancestral tablets, what is left to revere? You are sent with a sealed order to the princess's household registry. The seal bears the emperor's private mark, the one he uses when he wants to bypass the usual channels and erase the line between personal caprice and imperial law. The order is simple: expand stipends for the princess's attendants, assign guards to ensure their safety and their silence, punish slander with severity. The last phrase has been added in the emperor's own hand. Severity means death. You sign the duplicates with a hand that will not stop trembling. The political consequences are immediate, if not public. Great clans that once measured their future by marriages and posts now measure it by proximity to a princess's bedchamber. A father with a handsome second son sends gifts that reek of desperation. A provincial governor dispatches a poem praising plum blossoms in winter, a transparent plea to have his boy included among those blossoms. Rivalries sprout among the chosen. They study how to speak, how to laugh, how to listen with their throats open and their eyes shut. One perfects the art of reciting verses upside down to make her laugh. Another learns to pour wine so subtly no droplet falls, to make her sigh. Behind that polish, fear sharpens like a hidden needle. A misstep can end a life. And then there is the other truth, the truth that keeps you awake. The emperor does not merely tolerate his sister's defiance of propriety, he is nourished by it. Each breach of taboo serves him like a trumpet blast, announcing that laws are clay in his hands. He watches the men she collects the way a general watches troops, proud of their alignment, curious about their mettle, eager to test them, to test her, to test himself against the last remaining boundaries. One afternoon, you are ordered to deliver a message directly to the princess. The lamps in her pavilion burn even at noon. The air inside is heavy with sandalwood and something sweeter, almost cloying. She is reclining, a book open but unread, across her lap. Two of the attendants kneel at a respectful distance, as still as lacquerwork. She studies you the way a hawk studies a field mouse, alert, amused, hungry in a way that has nothing to do with food. You are pale, she says. Does my brother's world frighten you? You lower your eyes. Your Highness, the world is as heaven allows. She laughs softly. No, she says. The world is as we make it, and heaven is a mirror we tilt to see what we like. You deliver the message, an invitation from the emperor to join him at the private theatre that night. She takes the ivory tablet, turns it over once, twice, then places it on the table as if it were a chess piece she's already won with. Tell him I will come, she says, and tell him to bring the new musicians from the southern court, the ones with the quick hands. On your way out, one of the attendants looks up at you. He cannot be more than 17. His eyes hold too much understanding for that age. When the door closes, you lean against the carved lintel and count breaths until you can walk again. The brother and sister attend the theatre together that night, faces lit gold by lamplight, the rest of the world dissolving into a blur of music and wine and obedient bodies. He murmurs something. She laughs. She murmurs something. He nods. The curtains rise and fall. You take notes you will later burn, because paper should not have to carry what eyes cannot bear. In private, the emperor becomes possessive in the way of boys who have never been told no. When a favored youth smiles too brightly at the princess, in an antechamber, the young man is transferred the next morning to a provincial garrison renowned for its winter starvation. When a minor lord remarks, drunk and careless, on the princess's modern arrangements, that lord finds himself accused of embezzlement, convicted without trial, and escorted to a cell where the straw is damp and the guards bored. The lesson is absorbed. Speak carefully, want invisibly, breathe only when commanded. The princess learns the emperor's moods like the rhythm of a song, half conductor, half soloist. Some evenings, she plays the dutiful younger elder. She flatters him, coaxes him into laughter, eases the shake in his jaw that comes when old nightmares rise. Other nights she feeds the fire. She urges him to be bolder, to reorder the court as if it were a chessboard, and human lives merely pieces that can be cleared with a sweep of the wrist. Affection and ambition, rebellion and complicity, coil together like twin dragons chasing each other's tails. And beneath it all, the taboo that governs all kinship is shattered so thoroughly, you wonder if the gods themselves will shrink from this city. You are not a priest. You are a functionary. Yet even a functionary hears the silence in the temples, feels the way the wind withdraws from roof edges, how sparrows abandon their nests under the eaves of halls that once promised shelter. When foundation stones are mocked, rafters learn to tremble. One night, returning late from a drafting room where new edicts are written with a speed that suggests panic disguised as efficiency, you pause outside the ancestral hall. Lamps burn, low before the tablets of emperors past. The scent of old cedar and dried tears wraps around you. Somewhere, a door slides open. Laughter, a woman's, then a boy's, then both together, rising, curling, dissolving. You think of the princess's 30 companions, faces blurring into one long corridor of youth bound to a pleasure it did not choose. You think of the emperor's gaze, heat without light. You think of the word fairness, how it was used to crack open the world and drain its meaning. In the days that follow, punishments grow sharper elsewhere. Perhaps balance exists after all, not as justice, but as counterweight. A magistrate who criticizes a tax decree is paraded through the market with a wooden collar. A clerk who pauses too long over a name in a registry is accused of treason. The emperor has discovered that collapsing taboo in one chamber requires terror in another to keep the roof from caving in. He tightens his grip. The city learns to hold its breath. When the princess passes on her gilded chair, the crowds part more quickly now. Their faces are masks of obedience. Behind those masks, you sense calculations. How to survive a court that treats desire as law and law as theatre. Children grow up fluent in silence. Wives teach husbands which alleys not to walk. Poets learn to write about plum blossoms and never about blood. You copy another edict by lamplight, the brush whispering across silk. Increased stipends for the princess's pavilion. New guards assigned. A final line in the emperor's restless hand. Let no one speak of old customs. The new season is already here. You sign your name where you must and press the seal that makes blasphemy legal. The wax cools. The world tilts again. And in the tilt, you understand a truth too simple to be comforting. When a ruler and his sister make a spectacle of breaking the first bond that orders all others, the realm itself becomes their stage. There is no audience, only conscripts. No curtain, only night. You rise before dawn, summoned to the palace courtyard where the air tastes of damp stone and fear. The new emperor has ordered an audience, not to consult, but to display. By the time you arrive, the torches already burn though the sun has barely crested the horizon. Eunuchs scurry like nervous shadows, and soldiers stand rigid at every archway. Today is not about governance. Today is about cruelty dressed as ceremony. The young ruler sits upon a carved throne that seems too large for his narrow frame. His eyes dart restlessly, never still, as though every shadow conceals a rival. And perhaps it does. His paranoia is a living creature, gnawing constantly, whispering that uncles and ministers, generals and even eunuchs plot his downfall. To reassure himself, he chooses to torment them, to prove that fear is sharper than loyalty. 3 men are dragged forward, their arms twisted behind them, uncles of noble blood, princes once respected. The emperor calls them by nicknames instead of titles, words that cut like whips. Pig king, he jeers, pointing to the largest. Look how fat. You've grown on food meant for my people. He waves at the second. Killer king, always plotting, always sharpening your knives. His gaze narrows on the third. Thief king, even your shadow steals from me. The court is silent. You feel your throat tighten. These are not jesting, nicknames. They are indictments, preludes to execution. Yet the emperor is not content with death alone. He craves humiliation. He orders bamboo cages brought forward, constructed hastily, reeking of fresh sap. The three men are shoved inside like livestock. Then, before the horrified eyes of the gathered officials, the cages are slung onto scales. The emperor demands their weight be measured, laughing when the balance tips. See, he cries, Pig King outweighs them all. Shouldn't a pig be slaughtered? The courtiers force themselves to laugh, a brittle sound that dies before reaching the walls. You do not laugh. Your mouth is too dry. But the emperor is not finished. He commands servants to strip one uncle naked, shove him into a shallow pit dug overnight in the courtyard, and fill it with cold, muddy water. Into his hands they place a wooden trough heaped with slop, rice mixed with offal, fish bones, sour wine. Eat, the emperor orders. Eat as pigs eat. The uncle obeys, choking, while the boy on the throne claps his hands like a child amused by a puppet show. You know then what everyone else knows, but dares not say aloud. This is not governance. This is theatre of cruelty, staged daily, designed, not only to terrify but to delight its director. The emperor's suspicions extend beyond his uncles. Ministers who question even minor decrees vanish overnight. Some reappear weeks later with shaved heads and hollow eyes, forced to kneel through entire audiences as living warnings. Others never return at all. Their names are struck from records, their families stripped of property, their wives and children consigned to exile or worse. You recall the case of Minister Shu, a man revered for his scholarship. One afternoon he dared to suggest revising a tax edict that punished farmers already reeling from famine. His words were soft, respectful, but they carried the weight of truth. The emperor's face darkened. So, he said, voice a snake's. Hiss. You would accuse me of ignorance? You think yourself wiser than the Son of Heaven? Within hours, Shu was hauled to the courtyard, his tongue pierced with iron so he could no longer speak wisdom. He died 3 days later, delirious with thirst, chained to a post where dogs licked his wounds. You learn quickly what not to say. Silence becomes the only language that ensures survival. The emperor also wages war upon symbols. Ancestors who once commanded reverence are mocked. He summons artisans to repaint ancestral portraits in the temple, but not with honor. His grandfather is given the nose of a drunkard, bulbous and red. His father's noble face is twisted into grotesque caricature. Let the people remember them as they were, he sneers. Flawed, foolish, pathetic. When courtiers flinch, he laughs harder. Even the dead are not safe. One uncle, long buried, becomes the target of macabre desecration. His tomb is opened under secret orders, his bones disturbed, rearranged into obscene displays before being sealed again. Rumor spreads among the servants, though none dare speak openly. The emperor has discovered a new source of entertainment, degrading those who cannot defend themselves. His cruelty feeds upon itself, escalating like a storm that cannot stop growing. One evening, he calls for his guards to fetch the pregnant concubine of a minor official. She is forced into the palace as her labor pains begin. The emperor insists she deliver her child before his eyes, declaring that if it is a boy, he will proclaim him prince. She screams through the night. At dawn she gives birth, blood soaking the silk cushions, her face pale as death. The emperor smiles, announces the infant a royal child, and declares amnesty for the empire. For a moment it seems mercy has been found, until you realize the act is not compassion, but caprice. Lives are pawns in a game played for his amusement. When the court gathers again, the emperor paces among the rows of bowed heads. His voice drips with contempt. I smell treachery, he declares, All of you whisper behind my back. You think I do not hear? I hear everything. Every sigh, every glance, every tremor of doubt. He pauses before the Minister of Justice, a man trembling so violently his hat quivers. You, especially, your silence is guilt enough. He orders him flogged there in the hall, his screams echoing off the pillars while the Emperor's laughter bounces after them. What unnerves you most is not the cruelty itself, but the joy with which it is delivered. He revels in invention, new punishments, new humiliations. Yesterday, it was weighing uncles like livestock. Today, it is forcing officials to crawl on all fours while courtiers sprinkle grain before them. Tomorrow, you fear, it could be you. At night, the palace hums with whispers. Eunuchs murmur prayers in empty kitchens. Servants trade glances heavy with despair. No one trusts anyone. Betrayal can come from a careless look, a muttered complaint, a servant eager to curry favor by reporting discontent. You lie awake on your straw mat, staring at the ceiling beams, wondering how many days remain before his gaze falls upon you. And always there is the question, how can a boy not yet 18 wield such terror? The answer whispers itself in the silence after each execution. Because he can. Because fear is more reliable than love. Because the throne protects him as much as it magnifies him. Because no one dares strike until the cost of waiting becomes greater than the cost of rebellion. You rise again tomorrow, summoned once more. The torches will burn. The cages will creak. The laughter will echo. And you will stand, silent, recording decrees you dare not question, watching cruelty become the only law that matters. You are summoned to the inner palace, a place already thick with incense and whispers. Tonight is not a council of war or a meeting of scholars. Tonight, the boy on the throne has decided to play with the lives of the women in his family and his court. The grand hall flickers with lamplight. Rows of women, princesses, concubines, court ladies, stand in trembling silence. Some hide there, faces behind long sleeves. Others stare blankly at the marble floor, their minds already gone. These are not enemies of the state. They are his blood, his kin, the daughters and wives of uncles he has already humiliated, the sisters who once cradled him in infancy. And yet, here they are, lined up as though awaiting inspection at a marketplace. The emperor enters, draped in embroidered robes, a cruel smile twisting his youthful features. He paces slowly down the line, his eyes sharp as blades, lingering, not with affection, but with the detached calculation of a butcher. At each woman he pauses, lifting her chin with 2 fingers, forcing her to meet his gaze. Some faint, others beg silently with their eyes, but none dare resist. Then comes the command that curdles your blood. The emperor turns to his guards, his voice cold and casual. Choose them, one by one. The soldiers hesitate for only a heartbeat before obeying. Hands reach out, seizing wrists, tearing silk, dragging women forward into the circle of torchlight. What follows is not ceremony, but violation, forced upon noblewomen and princesses alike, while the emperor watches from his throne, laughing. He does not touch them himself. No, that would require intimacy. Instead, he commands his retainers to commit the acts, while he reclines like a spectator at some grotesque theatre, taking delight in the screams, the sobs, the broken dignity of those who once embodied the honor of his dynasty. Among them is the sister he once called playmate, the aunt he once called mother's shadow, the wives of cousins barely older than himself, all reduced to property for his amusement. You feel bile rise in your throat as you watch. The courtiers around you remain frozen, their faces masks of horror they dare not reveal. Anyone who speaks, anyone who even looks away in disgust, risks joining the women in their fate. The night stretches endlessly. The air grows heavy with incense mixed with the iron stench of blood, with cries muffled into silence. When at last the emperor claps his hands, signaling the end of his entertainment, the women are released, broken, humiliated, stripped of any sense of safety. Some collapse where they stand, unable to walk. Others are dragged away by attendants, their eyes vacant, their souls already departed. You think perhaps this will be the nadir of his cruelty, but you are wrong. Days later, he singles out the consort of a princely uncle, a woman of sharp wit and proud bearing. When she refuses to obey his demand, he explodes in rage. Before her horrified children, he orders her beaten 100 times, with heavy rods until her flesh splits and blood stains the marble floor. Her sons and daughters wail, throwing themselves at his feet, but he waves a lazy hand and commands them flogged as well. The message is unmistakable. Resistance, even the faintest shadow of it, will be repaid with destruction of not only the individual, but the entire family. And yet, even this does not sate him. He invents new spectacles of degradation. He commands that naked maidens chase one another through the gardens, their bodies lit by moonlight while soldiers jeer. When one girl refuses, clinging to her tattered dignity, he orders her executed on the spot. That night, he dreams of her, and in his dream she curses him, warning that he will not live to see the next harvest. He wakes sweating, furious, and has another innocent girl killed simply because her face resembles the ghost from his nightmare. Superstition becomes another weapon in his arsenal of madness. Priests and sorcerers whisper that restless spirits haunt the palace, avenging those he has wronged. Instead of repentance, he seeks to exorcise them with more blood. Sacrificing slaves and concubines at midnight, their cries offered to gods who surely turn their faces away. The palace becomes a labyrinth of fear. No woman is safe, not princess, not consort, not servant. Mothers clutch their daughters tighter, knowing that beauty is a curse under such a ruler. Eunuchs scurry through corridors with downcast eyes, praying they are too insignificant to attract attention. Every dawn brings new terror. Every dusk closes with more ghosts added to the emperor's growing army of victims. What unsettles you most is the normalcy with which he cloaks his crimes. He issues decrees about grain storage, tax reform, temple, construction, all the ordinary concerns of governance, as though his nightly spectacles of abuse were no more remarkable than changing robes. He sees no contradiction. To him, power is absolute and therefore cannot be questioned. His cruelty is not excess but entitlement, the natural right of a ruler whose subjects exist only to feed his whims. You watch the court fracture under the weight of this horror. Ministers whisper of rebellion but remain paralyzed, each waiting for another to act first. Soldiers grumble in barracks, uneasy at being forced into roles as instruments of shame rather than defenders of the realm. Even the common people in the markets speak in riddles and half-phrases, muttering of a boy king possessed by demons. Yet the emperor laughs, surrounded by silks and music, blind to the storm building just beyond the palace gates. He believes fear will last forever. He believes ghosts cannot touch him. But you, standing there with ink-stained hands and a heart full of dread, know the truth. Cruelty this consuming cannot sustain itself. It devours everything, women, men, families, nations, until nothing remains, not even the tyrant who unleashed it. You are summoned again to the inner palace, though tonight the atmosphere is even heavier than before. The air smells of sandalwood, smoke mingled with something metallic and unsettling you cannot name. The emperor, barely 17, sits cross-legged on a dais draped in red silk. His laughter cuts through the silence, sharp and chilling, as servants drag forward a bound figure. It is his uncle, a man who once carried the dignity of royal blood. His garments are torn, his face pale yet proud. He had spoken against the emperor in whispers, and whispers in this palace are death sentences. Tonight, he will be made into something more than an example. He will be made into a spectacle. You stand frozen as the emperor waves his hand. Soldiers obey without hesitation, pushing the uncle down before the throne. Instead of a trial, instead of words of judgment, the boy emperor announces his decision as if declaring a festival. He shall provide tonight's feast. The courtiers around you murmur, but quickly silence themselves. No one dares question. The young ruler has turned punishment into performance before, but this feels different. There is a ritualistic fervor in his voice, as though he seeks not merely obedience, but communion with something darker. The emperor orders the uncle restrained in a way that strips him of all dignity, reducing a prince of the realm to a helpless offering. He mocks him with new titles: Pig King, Ox King, Prey of the Dynasty. Each name is greeted with forced laughter from terrified attendants. You see the uncle's eyes, and within them a fire of defiance that will not be extinguished, even as his body trembles under the weight of humiliation. The emperor claps his hands, and servants bring forth strange vessels filled with honey, wine, and spices. It becomes clear this is no execution. This is a ritualized desecration disguised as cuisine. The boy on the throne calls it innovation, but the whispers of the palace will remember it as gui mu zong, a phrase that carries both absurdity and horror. You cannot bear to watch the details, yet your ears catch the sounds: jars being opened, chants from trembling priests pressed into service, the emperor's delighted commentary as though he were a child unwrapping toys. What should have been solemn silence becomes a grotesque parody of a banquet. Finally, the emperor rises, holding a cup aloft. He declares to all present, "Behold, the feast of loyalty. Let this stand as warning to every heart that trembles with betrayal." His words echo in the hall, bouncing off jade pillars and painted screens depicting ancestors who must surely recoil from the scene. The courtiers raise their cups in forced unison, their hands shaking. None dare refuse, none dare speak. You see, eyes glistening with tears, lips quivering as they mouth the required words of praise. The emperor drinks deeply, then laughs again, wiping his mouth with his sleeve. To him, this is triumph. A conquest not of territory, but of human dignity itself. That night, the palace feels colder than any winter. Whispers crawl through corridors like smoke. Some servants claim to hear cries in the dark, not from living throats, but from the spirits of the wronged. Others say they saw shadows gathering around the temple, shapes with hollow eyes watching from beyond the lamplight. The emperor, however, seems invigorated. He boasts of his feast, recounting it with relish to attendants who nod furiously to disguise their revulsion. He calls it creativity, calls it proof that he fears nothing, not even heaven or hell. You lie awake in your quarters, haunted by the memory, the laughter, the forced toasts, the trembling courtiers who pretended to enjoy the taste of horror. You realize the dynasty has crossed a threshold. This is no longer cruelty born of fear or insecurity. This is cruelty as art, cruelty as theatre, cruelty that demands audience participation. The term gui mu zong spreads quickly, whispered with dread across the capital. No one speaks it aloud in front of the emperor, but everyone knows. Children repeat it in hushed tones. Soldiers mutter it. When polishing their armor, servants tremble at the mention. It becomes a symbol of the emperor's madness, a reminder that no bond of family, no respect for ancestors, no tradition of reverence can restrain him. And you, standing amidst this storm, understand a terrible truth. When rulers feed upon their own kin, when power devours bloodlines in grotesque rituals, it is not only the palace that rots. The entire nation begins to carry the stench of decay. The boy tyrant calls it a feast. History will remember it as a curse. You are awakened before dawn by a messenger who does not dare to breathe above a whisper. The lacquered token he presents bears the seal of the ancestral temple. That alone makes your fingers go cold. The temple is the spine of the dynasty, where incense binds the living to the departed, where names, not swords, keep a realm in alignment with heaven. You are a minor functionary of rites, more ink than voice. But even you know the rules. Speak softly, step lightly, and never, ever alter what has been consecrated. By first light, the stone path to the Tai Miao glistens with dew, each bead a tiny eye. The outer gate stands open, and the carved beasts that guard it seem to lean forward as if listening. Inside, the air carries a solemn mix of cedar and myrrh. Bronze bells hang like captured moons from a beam painted with clouds. The tablets of emperors past sit upon their altars, lacquered, polished, and steady. The murals along the eaves show victories and coronations, history rendered in careful strokes so that the present might continue. He arrives in a flutter of embroidered silk, a boy king with the impatience of flame. The court files in behind him, grand robes, low eyes, 1,000 careful breaths. He should bow. He does not. Instead, he laughs as though the temple were a private stage and the ancestors his backstage crew. Bring in the new canvases, he says. Servants, pale as unlit candles, shoulder 3 tall frames draped in white silk. A painter, one of the finest in the capital, walks beside them. You know him by reputation. Hands steady as a plumb line, vision tuned to the subtle curve of character. Today his steps are uneven. His brush case rattles, the draperies fall. At first glance the portraits mirror the old, the founding forebear whose campaigns knit together a country, the learned sovereign whose policies softened iron into plowshares, the immediate predecessor, whose appetites were known but forgiven because power, like winter, is a season not a choice. But even without the emperor's prompt, you sense the trap. These are not copies, they are invitations to erasure. He saunters to the first portrait, the progenitor, the breaker of rival courts, and clucks his tongue. A hunter, he says, but where are his trophies? He taps the painted shoulder with a fan. Add a string of captured crowns at his belt. Let those who enter see at a glance how many rulers he led by the nose. Led by the nose. The words ring too loudly in this place. The painter's knuckles whiten around his brush. A court scribe at your side makes a mark on his tablet, then scratches it out, as if the act of recording could call down thunder. The emperor moves on. He stops before the gentle lawgiver, tilts his head, and smiles with all the sweetness of rot beneath fruit. Dutiful, dignified, he muses. But history must be honest. He lowers his voice without lowering its edge. Inscribed beneath, his ending came from within the family walls. Keep the calligraphy elegant, of course. Elegance is the veil of truth. No one breathes. Everyone understands the reference. In this temple, veiled truth is still truth. And to carve it into cedar is to set the air itself, whispering it forever. And then he turns to the third portrait, the one no brush had ever dared to revise. Your late sovereign, his father. Something is missing, the boy king says, cheerful, as a child noticing a fallen button. He was known for it. Why should paint be kinder than memory? He looks at the painter. Give him his rose-hued feature. Make it shine. Make it unmistakable. The painter swallows. He kneels and opens his box. Inside lie cakes of mineral pigment, each a square of Earth's breath, malachite green, orpiment gold, and there, cinnabar, red as a secret. He grinds it with water on a stone, and the paste spreads like dawn. His hand hovers over the silk. The temple breathes. The emperor smiles. Your job, learned over years of repetition, is to recite the protective verses when sacred images are repaired, the words that keep art from becoming manipulation. Your lips form the first syllable, but the master of ceremonies, pale and sweating, touches your sleeve without looking at you. His meaning is clear: remain silent or join the list of absences no one mentions. The first stroke lands. It is not garish. The painter is too skilled for that. He layers the color with restraint, building sheen and texture until the feature appears not painted but inevitable, as if the face has always carried this tint and the air simply forgot. The emperor leans in close, delighted. He points, suggests, corrects. A touch brighter, the bridge more pronounced. There. Yes, that is the man I remember. You feel the room tilt. In the ancestral temple, memory is not his to command. Memory is a river with banks carved by time and rites. But today, the river is diverted by a child with a stick. and the elders on the shore clap because the alternative is a plunge. He orders captions, little knives disguised as lines of praise, to be added beneath each portrait. The scribes bend, their brushes trembling just enough that the red of the seal impressions look like drops shaken from a leaf in rain. The emperor dictates in a sing-song voice. The founder, he herded kings like cattle, behold the tally at his waist. The scholar, good enough, until kinship turned inward and the night was unkind. The father, festive cheeks like late season, fruit, strong breath, stronger cup. Festive cheeks, strong cup, you taste ash. The rights officer attempts a protest couched in protocol. Your Majesty, the temple observes balance. To polish is one thing, to distort another. But the emperor cuts him with a smile. Balance, I seek balance. The past was too generous to itself. Let paint do what ministers never did. Tell me a version I can rule over. With a clap, he summons musicians. Flutes and drums enter the holy space as if it were a banquet hall. The rhythm they strike is jaunty, almost comic. He begins a slow circle around the altars, lifting the hem of his robe so it will not catch the steps. Pious choreography for impiety. He raises a cup of ceremonial wine and toasts the painted faces. To you, to me, to the family trade. You have heard of sacrilege muttered in corridors. This is not mutter. It is pageant. The incense coils on its bronze stand, twist and collapse, sending a sudden plume that stings your eyes. Through the sting, the faces on the walls seem to shift. Perhaps only the trembling of candlelight. Perhaps the mind's defense. The first forebear's gaze slides from the throne to the floor, as if the painted eyes refuse contact. The second's jaw tightens. The third's new color gleams and seems to throb with inappropriate life. A gust presses through the temple. No, storm outside, yet banners lift and fall like breathing. A gong murmurs without being struck. Several officials trade glances that last a heartbeat too long. Omens are not for speaking, only for storing in the body like winter grain. The emperor notices the draft and grins. So the old men sigh, he says. Let them. Their sighs are the breeze that fills my sleeves. He orders the painter forward again. The founding hero, he says, tapping the first portrait, should hold not only blades, give him a string of little crowns taken from his foes. Put numbers on them. People love numbers. He orders a junior scribe, young, eager, terrified, to bring blank slips. Draft alternates, the emperor says. Titles the street would use. Titles that fit the taste of our time. The child of ink looks at you, and you shake your head by not moving it, a warning housed in stillness. He dips his brush anyway. A lifetime's training bows to a morning's command. When the emperor tires of directing, he demands applause. It rolls through the hall like paper thunder. 1. Counselor claps a fraction too late. The fraction is a cliff. By dusk, he will be reassigned to a province where letters go to vanish in courier bags. No chains, no spectacle. Exile by silence is the preferred punctuation here. Liu Ziye's reign was brief, chaotic, and utterly disgraceful. Ascending the Yartsai throne at just 17, he turned fear and insecurity into cruelty, humiliating his family, tormenting his ministers, and even defiling the memory of his ancestors. His palace became a theater of madness, where power and desire twisted into perversion. Within only 2 years, his actions shook the empire to its core. In the end, betrayed by those closest to him, he was killed at the same age when most lives are only beginning. What he left behind was no legacy of leadership, but the infamy of being remembered as one of history's most depraved rulers. Liu Ziye's story is a grim reminder. Power without restraint, without humanity, always leads to downfall. As the work concludes, the emperor calls for the final rite, not of reverence, but of ownership. He asks the painter to inscribe in tiny script at the margin of each portrait, revised in the reign of eternal radiance, his era name a stamp on The faces that once gave him his right to have any name at all. The artist obeys. The characters are perfect, a beauty that disgusts you because it carries its own evidence. Skill can serve ruin. He departs as he arrived, a swirl of silk and a ripple of laughter. The temple exhales, and the court melts into corridors where words regain shape. You remain with the painter and the ash. He washes his brushes in a basin, and the water blooms with red until it is the color of pomegranates in late autumn. He stares at it too long. You tip the bowl, and the stain snakes into the gravel where it will dry into nothing the eye recalls, but everything the stone remembers. Night folds over the capital. In the quarters reserved for temple attendants, you lie awake and listen to the slow drip of rain from the eaves. Each drop is a syllable you cannot quite hear. When you finally sleep, you dream not of faces but of frames, empty, waiting, patient as a snare. In the days that follow, rumor travels faster than edicts. Market women speak of paintings that smirk. Palace guards glance away when passing the temple doors. A steward confides that the candles will not keep their flame, that every wick gutters, as if scolded. No one says curse. Everyone thinks fracture. On your next assignment to the temple, you bow as always, 3 times to the tablets, even to those that now carry captions like burrs. Your forehead touches the mat. You try to pray, but the words snag on the new inscriptions. The hall is bright, more lamps than before, as if the young sovereign believes illumination can stand in for absolution. You bring fresh incense. Before you light it, you look up, briefly, foolishly, and meet the eyes the painter gave the father. They are expertly rendered, depth within depth, reflection within reflection. In them, you see a young ruler who feared his own appetites, a son who never made peace with a father's shadow, and behind that, a boy who mistook laughter for armor. The vermilion shines. It will not fade. You set the incense upright. Touch, fire to its tip, and watch the first thread of smoke rise into the rafters like a line drawn toward heaven. Once, such a line would have been enough to carry petitions upward. Now it curls, disperses, and returns to your lungs, thin, bitter, instructive. The message is plain. When the living repaint the dead, the past does not change. Only the living forget how to bow. Outside, the courtyard stones are still damp from last night's weather. A sparrow hops across them as if measuring distances. You feel the empire shifting by degrees, the kind you do not notice until doorways no longer align and roofs begin to leak. A dynasty can tolerate harsh laws, even unsteady hands. What it cannot tolerate is a ruler who breaks altars to make a joke. As you leave, you glance back one last time. The banners hang straight. The bells sleep. The faces watch with the patience of mountains. You have the sudden, impossible conviction that paint can outlast policy, that one day someone will stand where you stand and read the little era name scratched in the margin and understand exactly what was stolen and what refused to be surrendered. You hurry down the steps before anyone sees you pause. In this palace, the difference between devotion and suspicion is the length of a heartbeat, and you, who tend smoke and ink, have learned the one lesson the boy on the throne never will. The dead do not need to raise their voices. The living raise them on their behalf, or fall silent, and let a whole country do the speaking in cracks.